Nigel has actually insisted that Kiev will have to seek a peace deal with Russia as reform leaders say Ukraine may have to be partitioned in negotiations with the Kremlin. Nigel clearly coming from the angle of, look, we need to cut a deal. We can't keep doing this thing with the over there. I totally agree with this sentiment. Politicians should be drafted into fighting for every war that they vote for. Wouldn't that, I think, a similar thing applying to the debt, where their pay gets significantly cut if we have a debt in the next budget. Anyway.
Agreed. That was actually a great comment, because I think what Albanese and the Australian government seem to miss is they don't really speak to the people who have come here from Ukraine, who are refugees from Ukraine. I've spoken to quite a few of them, and yes, initially they're very patriotic. They don't want their country to be partitioned, but at the end of the day, how many people are going to die in this war? How much is the worth of land? They are now recruiting 17-year-old females into the army. I mean, come on, seriously.
It's a meat grinder.
It's a meat grinder, and it doesn't serve a purpose, and it's not going to solve anything. And you've got, I don't know, I'm from that particular area, so I know Putin's a tyrant and Zelensky's no better.
Look, there's an old saying, and it says, war has never determined who was right, only who was left. And that's an apt comment here, because on one side we have, and I'm not going to take any sides here, but we've got the Russian side saying, look, I want a buffer zone because it's a NATO thing and they're encroaching. That's one of the arguments. The other arguments is you're on our land, the Ukrainians saying you're on our land. And then we also have ethnic enclaves, and those ethnic enclaves are Russian ethnic enclaves.
Exactly.
That they claim, hey, they're predominantly Russian-speaking. Where did we see that? Well, we've seen that in many other countries around the world too. So it's not just there. It's a problem, and there's ancient enmities and affinities that occur in many countries all around the world. And when we look at that, there was a peace deal that was almost signed.
Except for Boris Johnson.
Exactly right. So where do we go? Well, we come back to that military-industrial complex saying, hey, you know what, we can tap into this. We can create our own meat grinder. And how do we create the meat grinder? Well, let's sell weapons and arms, and let's do this, and let's get people saying, I stand for Ukraine and I stand for Russia. But what's happening now?
Oh, yeah, it's disgusting.
Sad.
It's like Nikki Haley saying, I want war with Russia. We're going to take them out. Vladimir Putin.
This is the problem. We've stopped realising the value of life.
Yes.
It's land over life. It's that industrial war complex that's making money. It's all about money. It's the same thing with the pharmaceutical industry. Everyone has to be sick for them to make money. Same thing with the war. Everyone needs to have a war so they can make money out of the arms.
Who has to serve in the military will become an issue in our next election. In the US, Sunak put forward mandatory military service. In the UK, in the US, you saw selective service now become essential registration. Potentially, in a Senate amendment, going to be for women as well. And we, NZ and a few other countries, we've now said can join our Australian military as well. That will continue forward to our election in February, whenever it will be, and I think will become a mid-range issue and will be expanded.
Well, interestingly, Australia, I think it was February 2023, and it sort of slipped away from everyone's mindset, is they sent a company of commandos as forward, what do they call it, advisors. Now, we've seen this.
To Ukraine?
Yeah, in Ukraine. They've been there for some time now. Now, where did we see this? Well, they did this during the Vietnam War too, where they sent in their advisors, and America did exactly the same thing. And then we start seeing mission creep. And mission creep, we start seeing this. Then we start seeing South Korea join, and we start seeing... So we're seeing this, and Australia has its area of operations. And we're starting to see that French soldiers are reportedly being found dead on the battlefield. Whether I can't verify that, but the source is out there.
They are. There are a few Telegram channels that post this and actually show you the French soldiers and American and it's just sad. It really is. It makes me sad. I'm a female. I hate war. So
no, it's fair enough. Look, I have a lot of thoughts on this topic. I haven't fully filtered. I have recently been coming to entertaining the thought that maybe the First and Second World War, it may not have been as good that we fought it, the way that we were actually lied into that war. It's a very controversial statement, but I've been listening, and I'm not fully sold on it either. I've been listening a lot to Peter Hitchens and a few others talk on the topic, and to an extent, America was almost lied into those wars and pressured into it, whereas the American people didn't want to do it. And I'm really worried that a lot of these European wars were things that the founding fathers of America, they didn't want to be dragged into of Europe, because Europe's always been at war, you know, historically. And looking at it, I'm just like, oh my gosh, the world wars had incredibly traumatic responses, generational impacts. All the most competent people in the First World War, you know, whether it was the artists or whether it was the politicians or the priests or, you know, whoever it was, the creme de la creme of the society went to war. They were the brave ones, and a lot of them got killed. And often these widows, they didn't get to have kids, or they, you know, fatherless homes.
It's the intelligentsia that was killed in a lot of the wars. But when you look at wars in general, wherever there's a war, America seems to be there at the moment. So, you know, Afghanistan and Vietnam, and
particularly in the last, say 80 years.
Yeah,
and that's post World War I, because I remember writing a thesis on ethnic violence and war back at uni. And what we ended up finding, you always walk out with more questions than answers, let's face it. But what you end up finding is wars don't start now. So if you look at World War I, you can trace it back to the Boer War, okay? And then it works its way up, and then you start seeing jostling of borders, and you said this, no, you said that, no, you said... And then other countries start pushing, and then, you know... And that's what we're seeing here. We're starting to see, you know, we're seeing what's happening in Europe, and we're getting, you know, there's a lot of vitriol between these countries now. We're also starting to see out in the Pacific, what's happening in the Pacific. Well, it's almost a case of where we're seeing the Japanese and the Germans. So Germany with its colonies and that all around the world. Japanese had the Pacific, so we had China. Okay, and so we're seeing almost this mirror image of what was occurring pre-World War II, and we're seeing elements of goading. So each country's trying to goad each other into making this one step that the other country won't tolerate, and that's where we're at now.
Yeah, wars happen when there's a miscalculation.
Yes.
Guys, we're getting on way too well, and we've got a ton of stories to get through. Just quickly, I wanted to very briefly cover this one. This is about